Hi, beautiful souls. This is Sadhana. Welcome to my channel and welcome back to the series on my collection of decks. Today, we're going to have a look at a series of decks that lend themselves really beautifully to the telling of story. And some of these decks explicitly have stories interwoven through various suits or even through the major cards. And other ones do it more on a metaphorical, mythological level. And so we'll have a look at about 13 or 14 different decks today. And some of them I will spend more time on than others. But I feel really drawn and connected to sharing these decks with you because when we're working with the tarot, if we're able to bring in multiple layers and multiple levels of story and myth and archetypal imagery, I think there's a potential to connect in different ways to different clients and querents, and even working with yourself. Certain decks unexpectedly might be able to bring out a memory or a subconscious pattern that wouldn't normally have arisen if that particular image hadn't provoked that. So beyond the level of the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith, Marseille, numerology, astrology, beyond all of that, there is this really beautiful opportunity through the tarot and different types of decks to do some really deep and beautiful work. Let's begin with the John Bauer Tarot, this beautiful collection of his art put together by the team at Lowe's Scarabeo really does create a whole new layer and endless possibilities really with the telling of story. And as I was preparing for this video, I really noticed that there are a lot of sun cards in this type of deck that show so much more movement than a typical baby on the back of a horse sun card. So here there is endless possibility as this figure on the card moves over to the right. So the card that appears here is definitely part of the story. It shows what he's moving towards. And there's something about the contents of his sack, the length of his step, the even though he has a lot of weight on his back, he's moving with purpose and moving forward. And I want to tell this story and I want to know where he's come from and what's in the bag and where he's going to. And it just naturally flows and creates this beautiful opportunity to ask the querent, to ask myself more questions. And whether this child clinging to the king's robe is a granddaughter, or maybe she's just run out of a crowd, or, it doesn't really matter, but something is going to come up for you when you look at his face. It's just so absolutely lovely. And she's lovely. She's adoringly looking at him. And it just lends itself to something beyond a typical King of Cups. And here we have the Page of Wands. And normally I read this card as a child of adventure, an opportunity to really take risks and do something outside of your comfort zone. And this card completely embodies that. It kind of has this Peter Pan-esque energy, with the way that he's dressed and so forth. So yeah, I don't know, there's just something really, sorry, I'll get my hands out of the way, something really magical about these cards. And the energy of the troll there. And there's no fear in the communication with talking with the troll. And so this is something way beyond a typical Nine of Wands. And so we walk into the story of what is bringing this child, perhaps youth, to talk to the troll. Just like the hermit here. So this, I'm assuming, is a troll that has been turned to stone. And these children are deeply connecting with the earth and the energy of the earth and the energy of the stillness of this troll. And they're in the forest. And I just absolutely love the fact that we're not in this kind of a deck. We're not bound by the typical meanings. And so you would think that this kind of a deck would be more challenging for a beginner reader. But I think the exact opposite. I think this kind of deck allows a beginner reader to kind of go off on their own adventure and to learn how to tell stories and to begin to tell stories with the tarot. Okay, this is Good Tarot by Colette Baron-Reid, collage artwork by Jenna Della Grataglia. And I feel that this deck gets knocked for being too soft or straying too far from a typical deck. And again, here we have a deck that lends itself beautifully to storytelling. Lots of fairies and angels and merpeople and animals connecting with people. And the symbols are absolutely beautiful. I love this giraffe, the slow movement of the giraffe, the child on its back, the lantern ahead, the wand, right, the light behind the carpet that is underneath the saddle. I mean, so much potential for revealing and storytelling. And this Eight of Cups here is, what is the perspective here? Is the ship moving towards? Is the ship moving away? Why is the chest open? Is this person being left behind? Is this person waiting for the ship to come in? It might be different every time this card appears in a reading, but you're going to know that by the surrounding cards. And here we have this beautiful Fae Page of Earth. I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous. And the dance, the element of the softness and the movement of the body gestures in the hands and the feathers in the suit of air just create a whole new experience. And there's nothing wrong with that. We don't have to stick closely to the idea of swords and pain and hurt. We can go into those messages in a completely different way. And the sheer beauty of some of these cards is also going to awaken memories and maybe even past life associations. This is just the most gorgeous, gorgeous 14 card here. So here we have Temperance and the opportunity to look at the card that comes after death in a completely different way. Whether the Six of Air takes you to a personal dream or the story of Peter Pan, you just need to allow whatever associations arise to arise. On the left is the Astara Tarot, which is a collaborative effort of 4 young artists, and each of them did one of the minor suits and then some of the majors. And on the right is Seola Thompson's Otherkin Tarot. And I think both of these decks lend themselves beautifully to the telling of story, whether it is going to evoke something from something that you've read or a movie that you've seen or a memory or a dream. There's just so much possibility with both of these decks. And they tap into something that is definitely not going to be revealed in a traditional deck. And so the beauty of these kind of decks, like I've said before, is sorry, I'm just laughing because this reminds me of Oscar Wilde or Noel Coward or something, is to get the querent or yourself more involved in the reading, because I think emotionally the potential for not just being receptive, being more active and more involved in the reading is really important and can be really, really beautiful. I just love it when a querent will sit up on their chair and they'll lean in, or if we're doing a video reading, that they will actually go, oh, look at that. Do you know what that reminds me of? And it has, I think just its healing potential is so much greater. And I think I did not plan for these two cards to appear side by side, but I think it's just really beautiful. Look at the similarity in the gestures. She's holding onto the bunny on her chest here. And there's that similar shape on the front, this proud chest. She's walking away from something. This happens to be a Four of Cups. This is a Page of Pentacles, but oh my God, I did not plan that, and I was not going to show these decks side by side. It was just something that came to me because of that first card. And I love that. I love the plaid on the Emperor in the Otherkin. There's just something that wants to bring in the Celtic mythology I just feel its strength and its power. It's just so beautifully done. And on the card on the left, we have the Four of Pentacles. And there is a boat, there is water, there is pentacles, there is movement, there's a hare, right? So there is just endless possibilities for bringing forth something that is so necessary to come to the surface. And I feel like sometimes when we're doing a reading, it's hard to get into the sticky bits. And here is, it's like a gift of almost making it easier to get into the stuff that perhaps you don't want to see or the querent doesn't want to talk about. Okay. So next we have Alice. On the right is Dame Darcy's Queen Alice Tarot, and on the left is Bubba Studios' Alice Tarot. And because both Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass have so many stories within the stories, I think this kind of deck just has unlimited potential for really doing deep, deep work. And the Four of Coins here, Humpty's on the wall. And then I think about the tower next. Yes, so he's falling off the tower. So you have the choice of going to the nursery rhyme, going to the surrounding situation that was in the Through the Looking Glass story, if you know it, or sticking with your RWS association. And so the possibilities are entirely up to you as the reader. Both of the decks use the Jabberwocky in the Page of Swords, and I think that's a brilliant, brilliant use of bringing this poem into a card. The Jabberwocky is a really difficult, nonsensical poem to recite with lots of complicated, made-up words. And, just reflecting on what does it mean to slay the Jabberwocky or to slay your Jabberwocky. We're talking about communication. We're talking about intellect. We're talking about, everything that's associated with the Page of Swords. And it's just such a brilliant use of metaphor for that card. I think too, you need to be careful with, because also on the other side of this, we have the potential to bring up really painful memories and things that are difficult to deal with. So even though this is a fairly innocent little story, this Five of Wands image might evoke something very painful, like a horrible, horrible dream or a memory. And we need to allow the querent or yourself to move as they're ready. It's really, really important, I feel, to work with the question, work with the person as they're ready, right? Not going too fast and not going beyond what they're ready to talk about. I like this Nine of Coins here. There's also a complacency here. So this is Alice probably before she went through I want to say too that Karen Mahoney does a great job. So in the guidebook, she tells you exactly where this is in the story, as well as discuss the Rider-Waite-Smith system. So she did a really good job. And I went through both of the books, and I did 2 videos explaining where each of these is in the story. So if you're interested, you can look to that, or maybe I'll put a card up here for you. But what I'm saying is the complacency here in this Nine of Coins is what provoked her perhaps to going through the Looking Glass and moving into that adventure. And I love that we have that other layer here. And here she is going through the Looking Glass as the High Priestess. Yeah. Right. Here's another example of something that might be quite overwhelming. Perhaps a childhood memory of being overpowered by some authoritarian figure. And throughout the story, Alice feels too big, too small, and these are just really deep, yet very important questions to be asking, if the need arises. All right, let's go next to the decks of Anna Maria Ferguson. I find that both of her decks naturally evoke story. So whether or not you are familiar with the legends, the tales, the mythology, which are described on each of the cards, you really have a choice. You can either go to the guidebook and to study and learn and get more information from the legend, or you can simply just kind of walk into the paintings. Her artwork is so beautiful. And I feel that if you just kind of soften your edges and allow yourself to be invited into these stories, they will reveal all kinds of crazy things to you. There's a few differences between these two decks. Obviously, this is a lot cooler imagery, a lot cooler colors. The Llewellyn is more sunny and gold, and they feel kind of different in that respect. But the other major difference is that with the minors, you don't get a legend in the guidebook. So these are more closely related to RWS than this deck. So this deck, you're going to get 78 stories in the guidebook, and this one you're going to get 22 different stories. So that may or may not influence the deck that you choose. You know, if you're, it's a lot to enter into this deck, right? It's a full kind of adventure that could take you, you know, easily a year to absorb and to work with. I find that this deck is a little bit easier because there's just the 22 legends at the beginning. And then when you go to the minors, they're very familiar looking, but she's also added a few different keywords and descriptions, and I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from her guidebook. I should also show you, so I do have a trimmed version of this deck as well too, which I have out more often. This is a fairly new one, and I recently repurchased this deck because I wanted to, I'm going to use these as flashcards, so I wanted to memorize these names and to get to know the names of the legends, because I feel very, very, very drawn to these cards. But you can see in trimming this deck just how beautiful her artwork is. This is the Cheminette Tarot by Eden Gallanter. It is a beautiful watercolor deck that evokes all kinds of emotions and story quite naturally. But also Eden has woven in stories throughout a couple of the minor suits, and she's also really good at tying in the imagery between some of the majors and the minor cards. And she's done, even though this is a really tiny little guidebook that comes with it, it's just so potent and full of thought-provoking questions and story and images. And I just wanted to read to you something from the guidebook from the Suit of Cups. Cups represent the emotional aspect of the human condition. I'm just going to get a couple cards here for you. The Suit's vigil is the fish, connecting it to the justice fish, which appears again in time. So here's time, the hermit card. And where is the justice fish? Here's the justice fish here. And the winged fish in temperance. Cups represent that part of ourselves driven by our emotional undercurrent, or whirlpool, or waterfall, or puddle, or tsunami, depending on our relationship to our emotional lives. So let's just look at a few other cards here, if you haven't seen this deck. And she goes on to say, this aquascape of existence, as defined by human emotions, contains the potential for the ultimate reward of the mortal coil, happiness. In many ways, cups are the rawest element of human motivation. Whether we are aware of it or not, this biological reward leads us to do every single thing that we do. The beginning of desire, of action, of accomplishment, love. And so both through her artwork and through her guidebook, she just weaves these amazing, amazing stories. And I love this Eight of Swords, this figure kind of caught between these two pieces of stone and using the swords to, you know, emerge from that experience. So yeah, so that's the Cheminette by Eden Gallanter. Okay, this one you'll have seen a few times on my channel because I've included it in several videos. This is the Mystic Fairy Tarot by Linda Ravenscroft. The guidebook is by Barbara Moore. And I'm just including this one today because in case you have missed it, one of the features of this deck is that in the minors, so here we have the Suit of Wands, we have complete fairy tales connected and written into the minor suits, which help develop a theme, help develop story, and help to bring in another layer of the suits. So, for example, in the Suit of Wands, we have the story of these two friends, these two young boy fairies, and it goes on to describe their relationship. And then in the four, they find this dragon egg. And so as we go through the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of wands, of course, the egg is eventually going to hatch and they're going to have to deal with a dragon. And so through the guidebook and through the artwork, they have really cleverly woven in the teachings of the element of fire and the Suit of Wands. So it's a really what I want to say, accessible way into storytelling if you haven't used story with the tarot before. On the left is another curated deck by the team at Los Scarabeo. This is the Rackham Tarot, and on the right is the Fairytale Tarot by Lisa Hunt. The Rackham Tarot comes with a very slim guidebook, so there are no references to the paintings, the source of the artwork. So if you're not familiar with Rackham's art, you have an opportunity to weave in your own layers, your own stories, your own memories, your own dreams, your own recollection of fairy tales, and to look at the paintings in a way that ask other questions that you wouldn't have of another nine, another 9 of pentacles or another 6 of swords. As opposed to Lisa's deck, which has detailed stories, and they're really, really detailed. They tell you the country, the origin of the tale, and there's a long telling of each of the tales, as well as a description of the symbols in the card, and a RWS association as well too. So the guidebook is really full and really detailed. And so you could use this deck over a real long period of time and, just kind of get to know each of the tales that you're not familiar with very, very, very slowly. Or you could just go into the paintings like I have suggested with other decks, and to allow whatever is coming forth in the painting to tell the story itself. And they will find their way to connect with each other as is necessary, and as the question or as the theme in the reading is emerging. And sometimes I feel like we don't need that detailed guidebook, and then other times I feel like it adds so much. So I think it really kind of depends on your mood as a reader or as a querent, and what you want to do with that. And of course, the artwork is quite different. And so you're going to pick a deck that will inspire and, evoke your own sense of childhood, fairy tales, your willingness to kind of dive into places and adventures that appeal to you. This is the Enchanted Tarot by Amy Zerner and Monty Farber. And if you're watching this series, you will have seen these cards in the collage collection. There's something about this deck also that I think would lend itself beautifully to the writing of stories. So if you need cards to be inspired to, to write children's stories or to write your own fairy tales, perhaps to write the own fairy tales of your life, I think this is a really cool deck to inspire story. And maybe even, I had never used this deck with past life readings, but just looking at it, it has that real kind of international worldly quality to it. Like there's so many adventures and possibilities with this deck. So yeah, don't forget about this one if that's the kind of work that you're trying to do. Last deck. This is the Line Starter by Seola Thompson, and I know a lot of people have a hard time with this deck, but it was the exact opposite for me. From the moment I cracked the cellophane, I found I connected with this deck. It was really easy to read, really easy to work with all kinds of clients, ages, sexes, situations, types of readings, and so forth. And one of the beauties of this deck is that it gives me permission to ask questions that I might not have been able to otherwise ask. So for example, this 10 of Wands to me looks like a little girl. just by her body position, the way she's sitting, the color of the hair, and the burden, this pain that this person is carrying. I get the sense that they've been carrying it for a really, really long time, and they might have that tendency to carry other people's stuff and have had that tendency for a really long time. And I feel a sense of permission with this deck to really help and work in the modality of healing, right, as opposed to divination. This Nine of Cups, so we're looking at, right, the cat that killed the canary kind of metaphor. And so you can ask the querent, well, what does that mean to you? What does that evoke for you just when I say those words? There's just so many layers. This Strength card, so there's a man here, there's a woman on top of the man, and then the lion is on top of the woman, and they're like climbing this mountain, and just so many layers and possibilities. The tower here takes me to Japan, and so maybe I'm going to ask the querent, if they've ever been to Japan, or if there's anything about the culture of Japan that has created the situation, that would let the tower card present itself. So my invitation for you is, if you've had a hard time working with this deck, to take it out and work with it in a new way, to work with it in the way of story, and with some of the suggestions that I've made today. So we've looked at a lot of different decks, and some of them have very specific legends and myths and fairy tales associated with each of the cards, but most of them don't. Most of them just kind of invite you to go into the artwork and to create your own story and allow the connecting cards to reveal the story. And this does take practice, and it takes a level of comfort. And I really feel that this is almost an easier way into the tarot than memorizing all of the associations and the symbols and so forth. And so, I don't know, there's kind of two different ways to walk into becoming a tarot reader. And one is through, step by step, learning all the major cards, and then learning the minor cards, and learning the different colors and the numerology and all of that. But I don't know. I don't think that is entirely necessary. I think at some point you probably need to do that, but it doesn't have to be at the beginning point. I think there's different ways to be of service to people as a reader. So thank you very much for joining me today. This has been a lot of fun. I really feel a lot of passion for reading in this way. And if you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer those below or respond to those below. And if you are interested to learn more about how I work with the cards and how I read and all of that, please subscribe to my channel and check out my Thursday night live chats where I talk about reading intuitively, and we look at specific cards and we look at different aspects of being a reader. Thank you very much again for joining me today. Stay well, my friends. Namaste.